I was devoted to my husband for more than 20 years, that this is how he truly felt about me. I wasn't leeching off him. I was just devoted to him, that now I was at a loss for words as I felt all my strength leave my body. After my husband called me a leech and threw out all my belongings, I took his job, his power, and made him beg me for mercy. "Don't you dare come back here, you failure," John yelled. "You don't need to rely on me anymore because I'm an adult." I tried to reply, but he interrupted, saying, "Shut up, I don't want to hear your excuses." John's voice rose sharply, and I realized that there was no hope that my feelings for him had reached him yet. I felt something snap inside of me, and it was the sound of the thread of love that bound our hearts breaking at the same time. I looked up and looked directly at John. "My name is Karen Johnson, and I've been a housewife for 25 years. I've been married to John for a short time, but now he feels like a stranger to me. John had been using me from the beginning. He wouldn't have blatantly cheated on me or tried to kick me out. I didn't care what happened to such a man. I had to completely defeat him with my mind made up." Ryan was born a few years into our marriage, recently graduated from college, and began working as a parent. I was excited to pursue my interests, but there was only one issue with my relationship with John, who is not a good husband or father, in fact. It's difficult to find anything positive about him. He cheats and doesn't even pay a fair wage. "Please, can you, at the very least, help with home expenses? Don't be so snarky with me when you're living off of my money," I would ask. John's response was always the same. I had been considering divorce a lot lately, but I couldn't just offer it lightly because my father-in-law, Bob, is ill, and maybe it was really hopeless. Hospitalized, he asked me to take care of John, and I owed it to Bob to stay as long as I could. His words were unavoidable, but I was torn between these conflicting emotions and felt a strong desire to get a divorce. I found myself thinking back on the happier times before we were married, and the turning point that brought about that happiness was actually caused by a misfortune that befell my father. Our family owned a small diner which my father was in charge of, cooking, and my mother served, and it goes without saying that the food was delicious, but my dad was a terrible businessman. He opened the diner with the intention of feeding customers delicious food until they were satisfied, which is, in my opinion, a noble cause. He barely gave profitability any thought, and he didn't care if the profits were small as long as the customers were happy. As a child, I took pride in seeing happy customers leave, so I never interfered with my father's business strategy. However, when I was in college, a crisis struck, and the company that supplied ingredients to my dad's diner went bankrupt due to the recession. "We've already paid this month's dues if this is the case." Naturally, such a business was not profitable, so our family's finances were always tight. "We may have to close the diner." My father stated that we were already barely making ends meet, and that there was no way we could spare additional money. Seeing my parents in such despair made me nervous as well, but as a college student, there wasn't much I could do, because I didn't think the bankrupt company would reimburse us. The only thing that seemed to be an option was to close the diner, which is when a regular customer said something unexpected. This regular lent my father a significant sum of money, and "I'm happy to help. I'll definitely pay you back." My father promised, "Don't worry about the money. Just keep making delicious meals." The man said, "Leave the diner quickly. Such a shame for such delicious food, but with the supplier's bankruptcy, you'll end up in debt." Later, my father began doing while I was waiting. A young man approached me and said, "I hear you borrowed money from my dad." I spoke with him and found out that he was the son of the man who had saved our family diner from bankruptcy about a year later. The business was with another food wholesaler, a major food wholesaler, and the wholesale price of food items was lower than before. "You're pretty. How about going out with me?" "Me with you?" I asked, surprised. Why not think of it as a way to say thanks for the loan? It was true that the loan helped us, and my dad had thanked him appropriately, so I assumed we owed him nothing more. John was the person who lent us the money. He worked for his father's company. John then whispered to me, "I could spread that around, you know? Even if he did spread rumors, it wouldn't affect me much, but it could trouble my father. What would the diner customers think with these thoughts?" I couldn't refuse Jay's invitation reluctantly, so I agreed to go out with him, and to my surprise, I actually enjoyed it more than expected. I was quickly enamored with Jay. "It's fun being with you, Karen," he said. "I'm having fun too." To which I replied, I never thought I'd consider marriage until I met someone sincere and good like you. He was also fun to talk to and knew a lot of exciting places to go. His taste in choosing the places we went to made me think maybe he wasn't such a bad guy after all. His straightforward words won me over, and I started dating John with the intention of getting married. John persisted in controlling me in a number of ways, and eventually, a few years later, I was married to him. Of course, I was unaware at the start that it was all a ruse. John seemed sincere, and I felt loved by him, but as soon as we were married, he revealed his true nature. Here's my salary for the month. Make it work, he said, passing me an envelope containing a pay stub. Since the salary was deposited straight into the bank, it wasn't suspicious to have the pay stubs. But I found it strange that all of them were handwritten. Nowadays, handwritten stubs are practically unheard of. But I got married 25 years ago, when computers were just starting to become widely used. And over time, I began to notice something strange about John's routine. He left the house at a specific time every morning but returned at different times. It seemed to change from day to day. I'm busy with various jobs as my dad's successor, he would say. Handwritten pay stubs didn't seem out of place. It's over $1,000. That's normal, right? I told myself that I managed with that small amount of money as best I could. In the end, even though I had doubts about Jay's behavior, I couldn't bring myself to say anything until our son Ryan was born. I asked him to stop nagging before I came home, and he would shout, "Okay, I'll call." His attitude only made me more suspicious that he might be out having fun or, worse, having an affair, but his loud voice scared me away from confronting him. But John stayed the same, so I believe that's when I first started thinking about getting a divorce. Then, when Ryan was in middle school, I was out for dinner when my mom called to tell me that my father was in the hospital. I hurried there right away, thinking that my mother was exaggerating, and my father laughed heartily. I was relieved, but then I remembered something that made my heart stop. Skip a beat. Oh no, I forgot to call John. It was too late. My cell phone was overflowing with missed calls from John. Panicked, I called him again, only to hear his sour voice asking, "Where the hell are you? Get home and make my dinner." I apologize. My father? What's up, Dad? John asked sharply. I answered in a small voice, "Yes." "What does your dad have to do with it?" he asked, abruptly admitted to the hospital. "Remember that you're my wife?" I was afraid of John's ranting, so I flinched and closed my eyes as he yelled, but I knew I had to defend myself, so I plucked up the confidence to say, "Isn't I asked John?" And he suddenly fell silent. I thought that by placing himself in my position, he would understand, but his response was more than I could have ever imagined. Yeah, I'd ignore my dad even if he were hospitalized. After all, I don't need him. I should be allowed to worry about my dad that much. So please stop talking back and listen to me. I'll say this, you would rush to Bob's side too, wouldn't you? I'm not like you, sorry, but you'll need to eat out tonight, I informed John after much hesitation, even though I knew it was a lie. That was all I could muster. I hung up the phone feeling numb. Since that incident, I truly lost all trust in John. It was then that I realized the happy times before our marriage were all an illusion. I see. I started making plans for a divorce a few years after Bob was admitted to the hospital and his condition deteriorated to the point where he might not be able to leave. I told John what the doctor had said, but John was unimpressed, so it will cost money. John wanted a housekeeper, not a wife, I said to myself, feeling depressed, but I couldn't just wallow in my misery. John said, "Can't you pay for it? We have Ryan and Karen here, and it's tough for us," as if it was someone else's problem. It brought to mind the time my father was hospitalized, and John obviously didn't care. "Just what are you worried about?" I asked. "I understand. I'll talk to my brother John." John said he called his brother George, who was married but childless, to see if he could help with the hospital expenses. Regarding Bob, I was at my breaking point. "Enough, I'll find a way to cover Bob's medical expenses," John exclaimed. "Remember what you just said," and I nodded firmly. In the end, my statement caused us to pay for Bob's hospital stay, and Bob's illness forced him to resign as president, leaving John in his place. Anyway, John hasn't come home much since I took over, and even when we talked about Ryan's future, he ignored my calls and said he wouldn't be coming home today. I sighed. "I'm sorry, Ryan. I didn't mean to cause trouble." I said, "It's fine. I don't care about Dad. I want to go to a university in New York. That's right, don't worry about the tuition. I'll manage it in some way. And soon after Ryan's acceptance to a university in New York was finalized as planned, John didn't even say goodbye to him. By the time Ryan moved to New York, the house felt empty, and John was only visiting once a week. Could you transfer a bit more for Bob's hospital bills? I replied, well, since I've already transferred more than half of my pay, could that be sufficient? John responded, you're the only one here. His contribution was obviously only a small portion of his salary, and his claim that he had transferred over half was obviously false. I knew this, but I didn't have the energy to argue. Years went by, and I learned that Ryan had a job. Now that Ryan had a job, it might be time to discuss divorce. I had planned for this over the years. The only thing left to do was to decide when and how. One day, after visiting Bob in the hospital and talking with him, I went home as usual. But I was shocked when I was about to open the front door. I didn't know why, but it was unlocked. Was it a burglar? I cautiously peered inside, and then I heard the TV and John laughing. Where should I bring it up to avoid conflict? These thoughts consumed my mind. John was laughing loudly while watching TV in the living room when I walked in, pleased that he was home. You're home? I said, yeah, I just thought I'd tidy up the house a bit. John said, yeah, but after looking around as John suggested, I noticed that some items in the room were missing. Well, it looks like some things are missing, so I threw them away. Your stuff, John said. I threw away my belongings without thinking, which shocked me. I ran to my room, but it was empty. My computer, TV, favorite mug, and bed were all gone. What am I supposed to do now? I raised my voice, and John scowled and turned away, sighing. How should I put it? I'm tired of supporting you. What does it mean that I am your wife? I was devoted to John for more than 20 years, that this is how he truly felt about me. I wasn't leeching off him. I was just devoted to him. Words failed me as my strength drained away. John continued, Ryan's a working adult now, so you have no reason to depend on me, right? Shut up. I don't. John became agitated and abruptly raised his voice. We were married only a moment ago, but now he felt like a stranger. John had been using me from the beginning. He never loved me, otherwise he wouldn't blatantly cheat. I wanted to hear your excuses. He yelled, oh no, it's hopeless. I thought my feelings didn't reach him at that moment. But then I felt something snap inside of me, the sound of the thread of love that bound our hearts breaking. I looked up and looked directly at John, asking, what have you got to say? I didn't care what happened to such a man. No, I had to completely defeat him with my mind made up. Nothing, he said, but if you want me to go, I will. I shut the door of the living room firmly and went to my room, but nothing was left of mine. I had the junk collectors remove everything, including the clothes, and John asked, which company did you use for this? I picked up the disposal company's flyer that was on the floor and said to John, you're going to regret this, as I dialed the number. I left the house right away after saying that, and the call connected. I'll be right over. Thank you so much, I said, expressing my gratitude before hanging up. I went to the disposal company after thanking them, and they moved my belongings into a storage unit I had just rented. I was relieved that my belongings were safe, and I reasoned that they had clearly felt something was wrong with Jay's actions. It won't be easy to get away with this. I called Ryan while gritting my teeth and gave him a quick explanation of the situation before saying, so, you should suppose that I've decided to move out while considering a divorce. All okay, goodbye. Ryan then abruptly ended the call, asking if I was truly that afraid. I thought, angry, as I put my phone back in my bag and left for a nearby business hotel. In fact, I had already decided where to move, and the reason was straightforward. I had been planning to talk to John about getting a divorce soon and starting a new life there. It was just happening a little earlier than I had anticipated, but to be honest, I wasn't in any trouble. It was just a 2-week advance of my plans. About 10 days after moving into the business hotel, John called me during lunch. As soon as I answered, he raised his voice and said, you stole my money. I asked, don't play dumb, because it was about my dad's hospital. I couldn't help but feel that it was wasteful. A typical housewife's habit. Maybe I should bill him for the hotel too. Brace yourself, John. Bills, the hospital called and said, oh, just pay it yourself. I'm not involved anymore since you kicked me out. I sighed and said, I've been transferring living expenses to you. You're supposed to pay for that. Sure, but isn't the bank book for that account with you now? I replied calmly, knowing full well that there was no money in that account, but I couldn't help but smile. I have the bank book, but it's empty. As a result, I'm saying that you stole it. I didn't steal anything. Don't lie, and who else could use it? He never thought the amount he transferred was too little, did he? I responded angrily, if there's no money for the hospital bills, why don't you use your allowance? John began to panic, obviously believing that I didn't know, because ever since our marriage began, I once asked Bob, how much is John's salary? And he gave me handwritten wage papers to conceal the fact that he was taking money from his paycheck. That is, the money he stole became his allowance. He seemed perplexed, but he told me, so I knew you were stealing money. I continued, and John was silent. For a long moment I wondered if the call had dropped, and then all of a sudden, John's words made me smile inwardly, because I had him exactly where I wanted him, and he couldn't back out. What's wrong with me using the money I earned? It's your fault for using up all the money I gave you. Okay, I said calmly, and I want a divorce. I'll demand alimony. You need to pay back the money you used. Oh, thank you. I wanted a divorce too. Conversations, what? But I mean, you want a divorce, right? I've prepared proof of your infidelity, and I'm waiting. Even though I couldn't see him, I could tell John was shocked by his tremulous voice. What are you talking about? Don't play dumb. I have photographic proof. I added, well, I'll give you the address, and let's meet next Sunday to talk about it in depth. After unilaterally giving him a specific address, I abruptly ended the call. I had successfully pushed for a divorce, so now if only I could get him to apologize. It would be difficult, but I was prepared on the agreed-upon Sunday. I got to the meeting spot early, so I assumed he would be there shortly. As I glanced around, I noticed John out of the corner of my eye. John looked up in surprise when I waved and called out to him. Yes, I had given him the address, but he looked behind me and saw a mansion worth about $1 million. It was much bigger than a typical house, with a garden, 3 stories, a basement, and even a home theater. A luxury car was parked in the attached garage, pointing at the mansion. I grinned. This is my house. It's brand new and gorgeous. Isn't that what your house is? Yes, I had it built recently, because I intended to move here after the divorce. Naturally, John, who had always considered me to be a housewife, was completely shocked when I ushered him into the living room from behind and said, let's have our discussion. I introduced myself by saying, this is my lawyer. My lawyer was waiting inside, but John was too preoccupied to notice. He kept looking around anxiously, as if worried about his surroundings, without even looking at the evidence of his adultery on the table or answering me. Eventually, John asked in a low voice, is that what's bothering you? How did you afford this house? Nevertheless, I replied, I simply purchased it as usual. Liar, how is this affordable for a housewife? One would normally need to make about $50,000 a year to purchase a $1 million home. But I had that type of money, so I calmly responded, I made that much. I got a problem with that. No, but how I was helping a friend with her company. And things turned out this way before I knew it. The story begins a few years ago when my father was in the hospital, and we had a fight. I decided to get a divorce and began getting ready for it by looking for a job. After the divorce, I needed a job to support myself, so I looked for one that would let me live on my own. But good jobs are hard to come by, so I asked my close friend Susan if she could help me with. Susan recommended your job to me. What do you do? Land-based aquaculture is a technique where artificial pools are made for fish farming. Despite its disadvantages, it is environmentally friendly because it reduces ocean pollution. Susan's father founded it, and she was now in charge, so I started working there. John asked hesitantly, but after you started helping, the business started to do well. My role was mostly administrative and negotiating work. Susan said I was a big help and got promoted to an executive position. It was all a coincidence, but I think that's part of skill. After hearing my story, John slumped in defeat, but then he looked up and said, okay, let's forget the divorce. How about we start over? I responded with a chilly look. Can you say that in your sleep? No, I'm serious. I really want to start over with. John begged fervently, but I knew he was only oblivious to my wealth. So I raised my eyebrows in response and said, I refuse to be with someone who cheats and who neglects their father too. You might not know this, but I was the one who paid for Bob's hospital bills. And the money John gave me was really insignificant after covering groceries, utilities, and other various costs. That's all he ever gave me, let alone enough to pay Bob's hospital bills. At first, I managed somehow, but after I started working, I paid the bills out of my paycheck. Despite this, you never paid attention to me or went to see Bob, which is why I can't trust someone like that. When I raised my voice, John looked deflated. The lawyer then brought up the subject of alimony, but John was unable to respond and simply nodded until the very end, when John signed the divorce papers under the lawyer's encouragement. The alimony was set at $30,000. In the end, I sent John away, grateful that the divorce was finally finished. My only regret was that I was unable to elicit an apology from him, but I did have one. Now that the divorce is finalized, you'll be paying for Bob's hospital bills from now on, I said. John nodded, apparently disappointed but not protesting. A few days later, as I was walking back from the office, someone called out to me from behind, "Hey, Karen," and when I turned around, I saw John standing there. "Don't be so familiar. We're divorced now." "Shut up, what did you do?" John looked at me, his face red with anger, and I realized that the conversation must have taken place at the company. I smiled and teased him, thinking that he would apologize. "Don't play around and tell me how you got me fired." John was stomping his feet in frustration, and I couldn't help but smile at his humorous demeanor. "Didn't you get fired for having an affair with the office clerk?" John had an affair with a clerk at his company, acting recklessly, believing he could do anything as president. I told Bob about this while he was upset about Jay's actions and regretted the divorce. I showed him the pictures of the affair, which made him even more angry. Then he offered to give me all of my company shares, Karen. Wouldn't that be better for George? "No, I want you to use them to remove John from office." That's what Bob had stated. Bob's company was a corporation where shareholders in smaller businesses, such as Bob's, where he owned the majority of the shares, a single shareholder could make important decisions. In small businesses, it's typical for the president to own the majority of the shares. When I inherited all of Bob's shares, I had the authority to make decisions alone, but I didn't fire him. Resolutions are required to appoint executives, but the board of directors can also make decisions. When I told George about the affair and my new status as a shareholder, he was thoughtful. But why did he listen to me? John asked, "It's not about listening to me. It's about what's best for the company." John immediately broke down and started to apologize, saying, "I'm sorry. Please forgive me. No, I'll be lost without a job." His situation was entirely self-inflicted, and I won't forgive him. "If you have the shares, I sold them to George and his wife, so I don't want anything to do with you anymore." I heard John crying at that point, but I walked away as if I didn't hear that he was eventually fired from the company. Maybe he could have remained an employee, but his haughty behavior made it impossible for me to help him. Since his entry through nepotism made that impossible, I refused to work for him. He claimed that after being fired, he was out and is currently reportedly working as a convenience store clerk, which is a difficult job for someone his age. He will probably spend his old age regretting not having money. As for me, after my divorce, I became more focused on my work. There is no discussion of getting married again, but there are a few men among my co-workers who have new jobs. While considering this, I got a call from Ryan saying, I am looking for my girlfriend." "Forward to it," I answered. "I didn't succeed in marriage, but I'm hoping that Ryan doesn't." "Yes, it will be all right because he is much more steady." More than I ever